Hello and welcome. Although I haven't met my guest until a few minutes ago, really, he and I have something that we share and feel very strongly about in common. And that something is that we both thought the world of the former Governor Elmer Andersen. Tom was his chief of staff, his campaign manager, and as he described it, his number 2 man. Tom also did all kinds of other things. I'll detail a few of them for you in a minute. But he's on tonight as part of my Minnesota Leaders series, my ongoing series. I'm just so pleased he could be here. Tom is 98. I'm telling you that because you would never believe it, although you might start putting dates together and wondering. So we'll answer that question right off the top here. He's going to talk tonight with me about his life, his career, his views on the Republican Party today. He's been a moderate Republican all his life. And we'll talk a little bit about a book that Lori Sturdivant wrote pretty recently.
We did
called,
this together.
And you wrote it with her, that's right.
I was a little involved with it.
Autobiography.
I don't want to correct you, but I'm not quite 98. I'm going to be 98 on the 4th of July. I'm closing in.
So 97 and
11 12.
11 12 to be precise.
You know, they count fractions when you're an infant, and they count fractions when they're at the tail end, too.
Well, it's good to keep track of details, right? I want to show everyone a close-up of the book here. Citizen Swain, a great title, and a really interesting, fun book to read. Any of you who are looking for a good read about Minnesota politics.
And history.
This would fill the bill, wouldn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Besides being one of the key leaders with Elmer Andersen, you were an executive with St. Paul Companies for a long, long time. You were a vice president at the University of Minnesota, and you're a staunch lover and supporter of the U to this day.
It's the Swain family business.
It seems like it, yes. And he was also head of the Centennial Commission back in
56, 58.
56, 58, which was a daunting job at the time. And then he was involved in, and I counted, 59 different civic organizations. And they range from being involved with the Courage Center to the Citizens League and being mayor of Lillydale, something you did when you were 85 to 89.
That was a youth movement. The incumbent mayor was in his 90s then, and I was only 85 when I ran for mayor.
So you had the youth vote, I bet, right?
Excuse me if interrupting you.
No. This is a conversation, not anything else. Being a moderate Republican is my label for you. What are you feeling right now when you think about our political world, Tom?
Not very favorable. It's very disheartening. People say I've left the Republican Party, and I say, no, it's left me. Dave Dernberger just finished a book with Lori Sturdivant, in which he emphasized the progressive part of the Republican Party starting back in Minnesota, back in the Harold Stassen days, and with an ongoing series of moderate Republicans who were very active in the governance of the state of Minnesota and did excellent things. And it's so disheartening today to see the changes, and we need to do something to get it back on track, because we need 2 vibrant parties, and vibrancy doesn't mean the far right, as I feel. It is too much exemplified today.
And the change for that movement to the far right, somewhere in your book, you write that during the Goldwater campaign, there was a shift to the right. And do you think that was sort of the beginning of what we see now?
Oh boy, I'm not sure, and I can't remember what I said in the book.
You know, I can find it.
Well,
real
that's
quickly.
okay. What?
Well, I marked it, so I'll read what
All right, please.
struck me. You said the nation's historians point to the Goldwater candidacy as the beginning of what would be a major shift to the right in the Republican Party in the last decade of 20th century. In Minnesota, some Goldwater backers went home discouraged after '64 and didn't return. But many came to see that you have to work together to succeed in politics. And then it says, Minnesota was slower than the rest of the country to make a hard right turn. And then you write, though to my regret, it has made that turn.
Well, those were in the days when we concluded that Goldwater was too far to the right, running for president. Actually, in retrospect, he was almost, by today's standards, a liberal. And in Minnesota, we concluded that we had to have a favorite son running for governor, for president. Now, God help me, I can't remember his name now.
Humphrey.
No.
No.
Oh, he was a congressman from the Minneapolis district.
Not Frazier.
No. Well, I apologize. We prevailed on him to be the favorite son candidate in Minnesota, and we resulted in sending 26 delegates to the San Francisco convention, 18 for the man who was a former 5th District congressman whose name slips me. Great guy. He was China, an ambassador. Well, whatever. And 8 for...
We need a iPhone, we'd look it up.
Yeah. And as a result of that, Minnesota, we then had 4 Republican congressmen, lost none in the debacle that was the Goldwater election. And Iowa, which did not address this properly, lost all 6 of their Republican congressmen. And I guess what I was observing in that book is that the Goldwater effort attracted a number of right-wing Republicans, more to the right than many of us. And as a result, some of them got miffed and went home when he didn't win. And some of them stayed on and recognized that this is a 2-party system. And if you're going to be a part of it, you have to put up with the losses as well as the wins. And maybe that was the...
It's a good observation. I mean, although, you know, the Democrats right now probably think, oh, if we could just prevail and take over the House nationally, or take over the Senate as well as the House and the presidency, things would be hunky-dory. But
I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
I'm just as well concerned about it in Minnesota. There's a tendency for rural Minnesota to go Republican now.
Right.
Farmers used to be overwhelmingly Democrat at DFL.
DFL, right.
And now, given crop prices and a whole series of other things, we've seen more Republicans get elected from out there with their frustration. They're concerned about the future, want something done, and that's the sort of thing that Trump has brought. We've been kind of polarized before, and nothing is really happening in the Congress.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump says, I'll make some changes, and he has now. Mm-hmm. Depends on whether you like a lot of the changes he's made, but he's at least taken some action. And that, as a result, has given a great deal of comfort to the Republican Party, because his base, no matter what he says or does, they still stick with him.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's perhaps more because of social issues than anything else?
I'm not so sure, more so, but certainly social issues are a significant part of what's going on. Look what's happening now down in the South on this whole abortion issue. Just going way overboard, and difficult to see whether or not they can pass any constitutional barrier.
When you get together with other moderate Republican friends, do you come up with any strategies for pulling things back more to center?
Well, in 97 and 11, 12, so I'm hardly on the front line of activity. And
But I bet people value your opinion a lot, Tom.
oh, I'm not so sure they do, but thank you. I don't know. The thing that bothers me is that the 40% that stick with him
Stay.
have been tested on every conceivable front. And
But he made the famous statement, I could walk down Madison
right.
Avenue and shoot someone and
he's right.
I wouldn't lose. And that's starting to,
So how do you change that?
yeah.
The economy is strong.
And that often
The Republican right
very
says,
well
why
for,
don't you stick with talking about the strength of your economy, because you can take credit for that. But he still drifts off on a whole series of other bases.
Did you ever think yourself of running for political office? I mean, you were immersed in it, but not as a candidate ever, were you?
No, I wasn't until I ran for mayor.
Well, that's right.
And I ran for mayor. I was chair of the planning commission, and the mayor's wife had difficulty and he had to move. And the other members of the council were not in a position to run, so they came to me and said, here, you run, you know what's going on. Well, it turned out I didn't know everything, because this city had spent more than it had taken in each of the 7 preceding elections, so we were deep in debt. And not that I did it alone, but maybe this is illustrative of leadership. We got out of debt. We reduced some unnecessary expenditures. We built a surplus.
Wow.
And we reduced the taxes for local taxes.
Oh, my goodness.
And with that, somebody ran against me. Said I didn't let people talk and that I held illegal meetings, all of which was erroneous. And I got to thinking, geez, after I've done such a good job, they run somebody against me. And I got reelected, but it was only by 61 to 39. That was so vague, I thought, vain. Why could anybody vote against me after that great job? But
Yeah.
you never know when you undertake political office, what's apt to be the case.
You're attacked for everything, aren't you? Kind of.
Virtue doesn't always get rewarded.
That's a good line, Tom. So, what was your secret? How did you balance the budget and build a surplus and not raise taxes? And
Well, I renegotiated the police contract and turned off the lights in the parking lot when we didn't have a meeting. It was a whole series of things.
a lot of little things.
Yeah, and it just seemed kind of sensible way to do things, and we were able to succeed.
Good sense goes a long ways, right?
Yes.
What do you think, if you could just list a couple, 2 or 3 qualities that make for a strong leader, whether the leader be in business or government, or in the nonprofit world? What does it take, in your opinion?
Well, there are various ways of doing it. In my case, I think I've always been known as somebody who asks questions. People say I'm the first one out of the box with questions.
Man after my own heart.
I went back at the university to be an interim vice president of university relations at age 75 for 2 years under Presidents Hasselmo and
Brunix?
Hasselmo and
Brunix, right?
Brunix was 10 years later.
Oh,
That was when I was 83.
I'm sorry.
Mark Udoff.
Okay.
And I had enough sense, having come from a background of about half in the private sector and half in public sector, of having a significant amount of knowledge. But I knew that the worst thing you can do is come in there and start telling them how they should change the culture, because many people think a university culture is significantly different than a private sector culture, which it is and should be. And I kept my mouth shut. I asked questions. And after a while, people kind of concluded, hey, this guy's okay. Let's listen to him.
So questions, listening.
I went to work for the St. Paul companies at age 42. And they presented me over the course of a few years with a number of advancement opportunities. And I finally asked the CEO, I said, I don't have that much of a direct insurance background. What kind of confidence do you have in me? He says,
That's a good question.
he said, you get the job done. You get the job done. You get the work done.
So that
That's
Protestant
possible
work
leadership.
ethic.
Yeah, because I had 16 different salary jobs in my history. Gosh, that's scary. Half public, half private sector. And I think people who worked with me frequently said, you were the toughest boss I ever had, but you were fair.
Oh, that's a great compliment.
You were fair.
You know, Chuck Denny, who's a friend of mine.
I'm having lunch with him tomorrow.
Are you?
Oh, yeah, he's a good buddy of mine. Yeah.
Chuck said, ask Tom this question. I said,
boy.
I promise I will. The question is, how you made the decision, and maybe many little decisions along the way, to give so much of your life to the public and nonprofit sector, because you could have made a lot of money staying, you know, in more of the for-profit world.
Maybe.
Was there a conscious decision that was undergirding your decisions?
I was born in Minneapolis. I'm a Minnesotan. I wear that badge very proudly. And many of these activities related directly or indirectly to the health and welfare of this state. That, as much as anything, has motivated me in my life cycle. I'm so proud to live here. I'm so proud to be able to tell people, others. My three brothers all went to California. I'm the only one left. I'm the oldest. I tell their siblings and my nieces and nephews, there's something to be said for living in Minnesota. We live longer than the people of any other state, with the exception of Hawaii. I like our first. I like us. That's just, and I like to have been a part of that.
So you really had what I would call a mission.
Oh, maybe. I'm not sure.
A purpose that was bigger than your own personal life.
Well, opportunities came to me, and it looked like a good challenge. And you know, I spent 23 years with the St. Paul companies, so that wasn't a short time.
It's a big hunk of time.
And the public service missions, jobs, running the late state's centennial, 1956 to 58. We had an opportunity to demonstrate how precious it was to live in Minnesota. And we came off doing a lot of things that were number ones. This was a great time. It was good to be part of the state, because we took great pleasure in talking about the strong points. That's fun to do. That's fun to reflect back on.
And we still get ranked very high with quality of life, don't we?
Oh boy, everything. Have you, not to punch the book of his, but Lee Lynch, his book, Amazing Minnesota.
Yeah, that's a great.
Coffee table size book. It's done art style, and it talks about all the Minnesota first, seconds, and thirds and how great we are. That's fun to me. We should do more of that. We should talk about, instead of yelping about being the worst tax in the world, we get something for our taxes.
But you know, we've got a few things on our record that aren't so good too.
Sure. Okay.
The one that bothers me the most right now, and I bet it bothers you too, is our achievement gap between kids of color. We're number 50, Tom. You know, and that's
I don't want to be
unacceptable.
defensive on that part, but Well, part of it is because we do so well with the white community.
Oh, that's an interesting way to think about it.
And I don't want to be defensive on this front, but we've tried. Oh, Don Samuels, who ran for mayor in Minneapolis and
Right. I had him on.
then went on to the Minneapolis School Board. And I served with him on the board of Twin Cities Rise.
Right.
He said, Tom, 76% of African American families in the Twin Cities are single parent. And my friend, Father Kevin McDonough, said, you know, this is now 3-generational. These are young African American women having children and not even had the opportunity of having grown up in a. And I think economically there's disadvantages there that are hard to overcome. I watch my grandchildren today dealing with their youngsters. You know, I've got 10 of them, and they're all pretty tender. And the time they spend with them and what they're doing. And they're preparing them for kindergarten, and they have the time and the resources to do that in a way that isn't as much of an advantage in much of the African American
Right. They're not working
community.
2 jobs and
Yeah, they're doing so much better job than I did with my kids, or my kids did with theirs. It's incredible. They're prepared to succeed and when they get kindergarten.
really nurturing in
Yeah,
the
that must be
strong
part
sense.
of it. But again, I'm not expert on this area, although it troubles me.
Well, I agree. That could be a whole nother discussion,
Yeah.
couldn't it? When you look back at your career and the blending of your career and volunteer work with your family life, do you regret at all how much you gave to Minnesota? Did the family suffer, do you think, because of it?
You'd have to ask my wife, and she's no longer with us.
Yeah.
I took on assignments where I had to make a decision almost immediately when it was presented to me. And much of it was when I had kids that were very, very tender.
Oh, yeah.
And that necessitated my being away from home more so than would otherwise have been the case. And she took this in good stead and never, you know, we discussed it and she always went along with me. And
So that made a huge difference, I bet.
absolutely it did. And I think I was a pretty good father, but I could have been better.
Well, she was a strong woman, and as I read about your mother and your wife, I thought you really had some strong women in your
Oh boy.
personal life that must be, in part, why you've been such a leader, Tom.
I'm sure you're right. My father vanished when I was a freshman in college.
That was just a
Yep, pretty bizarre,
awful
yeah.
chapter, wasn't it?
And with that, we lost our house and moved into my 3 brothers and I, and my mother moved into an apartment. And my mother took on being a life insurance salesperson in 1940 when a woman out in the community working was most unusual, and then in life insurance.
Yeah.
And she was strong, she was tough. She perhaps could have been a little more sweeter. But the longer I live, the more I appreciate
But
what she did and what she accomplished.
I bet.
And that was real leadership.
Yeah. She was an amazing sounding
She
woman.
became known as Miss Pep. She founded the Minneapolis Park Board Community Singing Program in 1918, right at the end of World War I. She used to get 20 to 30,000 people out in community singing.
She was like an entertainer premier, wasn't she?
Became known as Miss Pep. And when I was born in 21, it was front page in the paper, you know.
Was
Miss
it?
Pep had a baby.
Oh, wow.
Real sweet
I bet
night.
she would have loved to have been able to keep that career path going.
I'll
As
give you
a
an
singer
example of
and
herself.
musician.
She ended up in an apartment on Franklin and DuPont, and she called the publisher of the Minneapolis paper, a friend of mine, and was complaining because the Sunday paper had all these inserts. And she says, I'm in my 80s, I don't read those. You can save some money if you will take those out of the paper before you deliver it to me, because I have to walk from my apartment to go get it. And the publisher, he didn't know how to answer that one, because there wasn't any way they were going to delete the inserts. The Sunday paper, oh boy.
Well, that's neat, though. I mean, she was stating her opinion and feelings.
Oh boy, yeah, she could do that.
Role model for you, too,
I'm
right?
sure some of that rubbed off on me.
Yeah, I bet so. We've got about 40 seconds left, Tom. Did you ever resent being called the number 2 man?
No.
That was not.
No,
I mean, that's.
Just ended up in that capacity in a number of ventures, but also ended up in number 1 and some others. But number 2 of the governor and number 2.
Yeah, when you're number 2 to people that are at such a high level,
he was a great
that's number
mentor
1,
of
isn't
mine,
it?
yeah.
Really, in your.
Great mentor of mine.
Yeah.
Extraordinary human being, Elmer
I
L.
love
Andersen.
that man too.
Oh boy, we need more of his kind.
Maybe I can have you back sometime. We'll just reminisce about his legacy and his life.
Yeah.
I've got to say goodbye now, but thank you so much for coming down.
Enjoyed. Yep, pleasure.
It was great to get to sit and visit with you. I have so many more questions, but maybe we'll do a part 2. So thank you, Tom Swain.
I enjoyed. Thank you. Glad to be with you.
I've been talking with Tom Swain. If you turned in late after the introduction, he was the campaign manager and real big leader way back in the...
Also made him an ex-governor because I couldn't find 92 more votes in the recount.
Yes, that was another chapter, wasn't it? Lots to talk about.
Sorry.
Thank you for being with Tom and I. I'll be back again next week. Until then, have a good week.